mentioned. They are formed by the mucous membrane which envelops the chorda tympani nerve, and are situated, one in front of, and the other behind, the manubrium of the malleus. They are named the anterior and posterior recesses of Troeltsch. In the tympanic cavity this membrane is pale, thin, slightly vascular, and covered, for the most part, with columnar ciliated epithelium, but over the pyramidal eminence, ossicles, and tympanic membrane it possesses a flattened non-ciliated epithelium. In the tympanic antrum and mastoid cells its epithelium is also non-ciliated. In the osseous portion of the auditory tube the membrane is thin, but in the cartilaginous portion it is very thick, highly vascular, and provided with numerous mucous glands. The epithelium which lines the tube is columnar and ciliated. Vessels and nerves. The arteries are 6 in number. 2 of them are larger than the others. These are the tympanic branch of the internal maxillary, which supplies the tympanic membrane, and the stylomastoid branch of the posterior auricular, which supplies the back part of the tympanic cavity and mastoid cells. The smaller arteries are the petrosal branch of the middle meningeal, which enters through the hiatus of the facial canal, a branch from the ascending pharyngeal, and another from the artery of the pterygoid canal, which accompany the auditory tube, and the tympanic branch from the internal carotid, given off in the carotid canal and perforating the thin anterior wall of the tympanic cavity. The veins terminate in the pterygoid plexus and the superior petrosal sinus. The nerves constitute the tympanic plexus, which ramifies upon the surface of the promontory. The plexus is formed by 1. The tympanic branch of the glossopharyngeal, 2. The carotico-tympanic nerves, 3. The smaller superficial petrosal nerve, and 4. A branch which joins the greater superficial petrosal. The tympanic branch of the glossopharyngeal, Jacobson's nerve, enters the tympanic cavity by an aperture in its floor close to the labyrinthic wall, and divides into branches which ramify on the promontory and enter into the formation of the tympanic plexus. The superior and inferior carotico-tympanic nerves from the carotid plexus of the sympathetic pass through the wall of the carotid canal, and join the branches of the tympanic branch of the glossopharyngeal. The branch to the greater superficial petrosal passes through an opening on the labyrinthic wall in front of the fenestra vestibuli. The smaller superficial petrosal nerve, from the otic ganglion, passes backward through a foramen in the middle fossa of the base of the skull, sometimes through the foramen ovale, and enters the anterior surface of the petrous part of the temporal bone through a small aperture, situated lateral to the hiatus of the facial canal. It courses downward through the bone, past the genicular ganglion of the facial nerve, receiving a connecting filament from it, and enters the tympanic cavity, where it communicates with the tympanic branch of the glossopharyngeal and assists in forming the tympanic plexus. The branches of distribution of the tympanic plexus are supplied to the mucous membrane of the tympanic cavity. A branch passes to the fenestra vestibuli, another to the fenestra cochleae, and a third to the auditory tube. The smaller superficial petrosal may be looked upon as the continuation of the tympanic branch of the glossopharyngeal through the plexus to the otic ganglion. In addition to the tympanic plexus there are the nerves supplying the muscles. The tensor tympani is supplied by a branch from the mandibular through the otic ganglion, and the stapedius by a branch from the facial. The chorda tympani nerve crosses the tympanic cavity. It is given off from the sensory part of the facial, about 6 mm before the nerve emerges from the stylomastoid foramen. It runs from below upward and forward in a canal, and enters the tympanic cavity through the iter chordae posterius, and becomes invested with mucous membrane. It traverses the tympanic cavity, crossing medial to the tympanic membrane and over the upper part of the manubrium of the malleus to the carotid wall, where it emerges through the iter chordae anterius, canal of Eugier. End of section 58.